Shoot, 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 shoot.
Hey guys, welcome. It's that time again. Ren City's back at it with sports and shorts of sorts. So let's kick this episode 69 off. Yeah, we're 69 and up here. I mean that in the best way. But let's start it off by doing the jersey mentions, just like we do each episode. And starting just like where we have been starting around the 60s here in the NFL. And the first 69 that comes to mind, I'm not saying Gronk, he never wore it. We can't put him in here. But one of the best pass rushers of his generation, Jared Allen, the Cowboy. He played collegiate football for the Idaho State Bengals, the Big Sky Conference. In his time there, he put up huge numbers, winning the Buchanan Award for Best Defensive Player in Div 1. And despite his great college numbers, a lot of teams overlooked him. They thought maybe 6th or 7th round, but the Chiefs surprised people when they picked him in the 4th round of the '04 draft. The late draft choice would have an immediate impact on the defense, and Allen made all-rookie team. His impact on the game just grew and grew, and in 2007, he led the NFL in sacks, making the first Pro Bowl of his career, as well as the first team All-Pro. He'd signed a franchise tag to stay with the Chiefs, but only for a few months later until he was traded to the Vikings. Then he'd signed at the time the richest contract of a defensive player in NFL history, and with the Vikings, he continued to be one of the best pass rushers in the league. First 2 seasons there, making back-to-back Pro Bowls as well as back-to-back first-team All-Pros. 2010, he had a really slow start to the season, only registering 1 sack in his first 7 games, but recorded 10 in the next 9. The following season, Jared Allen would have one of the best NFL seasons ever, registering 22 sacks, 0.5 behind the NFL record shared by Michael Strahan and later TJ Watt. And Jared Allen was just 7 votes short of winning the NFL Defensive Player of the Year that season. Episode 55's Terrell Suggs of Baltimore wound up winning the 2011 NFL Defensive Player of the Year that year. Allen would again return to the Pro Bowl, get another first-team Pro nod. Following season, he'd make his last Pro Bowl of his career. In the following season, Allen would leave in free agency to join the Chicago Bears. And with the Bears running a 3-4, Allen would get some time at the outside linebacker position. During the 2015 season, he'd get traded to the Panthers, where he helped contribute to a team that got the Super Bowl 50. However, they'd fall to the Broncos, and Allen would miss out on that Super Bowl ring. A few days later, after the Super Bowl, he'd announced his retirement by posting a video on Twitter of himself on a horse, literally riding off into the sunset. In retirement, Jared Allen has narrowly missed out on getting enshrined in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He's missed out on 4 straight years. It's touch and go whether he'll get in, it seems, but I think he's pretty close. Like at his peak, he was peaking. But however, he's been honored by his former team, the Minnesota Vikings. He's inducted to the Ring of Honor as well as being named one of the 50 greatest Vikings. Jared Allen also shares 2 NFL records, most career safeties, where he's tied with Justin Houston and Doug English at 4 on their career, as well as 2 safeties in 1 season, a record he shares with 19 other players. So he's keeping it safe, except for the quarterback, I guess. Sticking with the NFL, we'll move to the offensive line and talk about longtime Green Bay Packer David Bakhtiari. The offensive tackle played college football with the University of Colorado, and Bakhtiari was a beast as a Buffalo. He'd earned 2 second-team All-Pac-12 nods during his time there, foregoing his senior season to enter the NFL draft, where the Packers selected him in the 4th round of the 2013 draft. Bakhtiari would end up starting every game at left tackle his rookie season, where he'd continue to develop into one of the best offensive tackles in the game. 2016, he'd sign a contract extension to stay in Green Bay, which was also his first Pro Bowl appearance, as well as second-team All-Pro nod. The second season, Bakhtiari would make his second-team All-Pro, and even got better that following season, earning his first-team All-Pro recognition. He'd make the next 2 Pro Bowls and earn his final first-team All-Pro nod. Fortunately, that was where the knee injuries would become more frequent. He tore his ACL late in 2020, limiting him to 1 game the following season. The next season, Bakhtiari would play a lot more games, but he'd require an emergency appendectomy that would make him miss some more time. Then he'd get another knee injury, which limited him to just 1 game again last season. After the season, his 11th with the franchise, Green Bay decided to release David Bakhtiari. Not the ideal ending to a great relationship, but injuries have really got the best of him the last few seasons. Bakhtiari is not officially retired, and he's looking to play in the NFL next season. I hope he can stay healthy enough to do so because he deserves to go off on his own terms. A great offensive tackle, and he seems like a pretty solid dude. Sticking with 69, we'll stick with the offensive line, talking about longtime Miami Dolphin Keith Sims. Sims played collegiate football at Iowa State, where he'd make second team All Big 8 with the Cyclones. This led to the Dolphins selecting him in the second round in the 1990 draft. They had a great offensive line, and Sims was a big part of it. Right out of the gate, making all-rookie team. He blocked for Dan Marino, and he'd make 3 consecutive Pro Bowl appearances, picking up 1 second-team All-Pro as well. He'd also go to play a few seasons with the Washington Redskins before calling it a career. Sims was honored by the Dolphins, getting named to their Walk of Fame, and he's been in coaching at the varsity level, where he's an offensive line coach for the second-year Jaguars in Georgia. Sticking with offensive linemen that wore 69, our next mentions Jordan Gross, where Gross played college football at the University of Utah, where he was a stud, first team All-Mountain West and consensus All-American recognition. He did not give up a sack his final 2 seasons at the university. This led to the Panthers selecting Gross with the 8th pick of the 2003 NFL Draft. Immediate impact starting every game for the Panthers, getting named to the All-Rookie team. Very good offensive tackle that over his career made 3 Pro Bowls and 1 first-team All-Pro. He'd retire after playing his entire career with the Panthers, and in retirement, the Panthers inducted Gross into the Panthers Hall of Honor. The next 69 on our list takes us back to the defensive line. Former nose tackle Tim Crumry. Crumry was an absolute beast at the University of Wisconsin. He was recruited as a linebacker, but he moved to nose tackle, and the rest was history. 3-time first-team All-Big Ten during his time at Wisconsin, a consensus All-American. And despite that dominance, he dropped to the 10th round of the 83 NFL Draft, where the Cincinnati Bengals would pick him. Crumry was a beast in the NFL as well. After a few seasons, he'd get back-to-back Pro Bowl selections, picking up second team and first team for All-Pro. And then in Super Bowl 23 against the 49ers, Crumry suffered one of the most severe injuries in Super Bowl history. He went for a tackle and wound up breaking his tibia and fibula. The injury was severe to the extent they had to get an inflatable splint to safely get him off the field. Crumry did not want to leave the stadium, though, and refused to go to the hospital, wanting to watch the rest of the game. He only did leave after paramedics told him he'd go into shock. I mean, that game is mostly remembered for Joe Montana finding John Taylor in the back of the end zone to clinch the Super Bowl for the 49ers, but yeah, it was literal insult to injury for Crumry. He needed a 15-inch steel rod surgically implanted to stabilize the leg, but he was ready to go by the start of the 89 season. He was still a solid player, but not the same guy he was pre-injury. After retiring from playing, Tim Crumry was named to the Bengals' 40th and 50th anniversary team, and he was inducted to the College Football Hall of Fame for that dominance I mentioned at Wisconsin. He went into coaching right after retiring, acting as a defensive line coach with his former team, the Bengals, and he's also coached defensive line for the Bills and the Chiefs. The next 69 on our list is back to the offensive line, talking about former guard Mark Schlereth. Schlereth was, we might know him more from his work on ESPN, and he's a solid offensive lineman back in his day. Born and raised in Alaska, he played football at the University of Idaho, and that play led to him dropping to the 10th round of the 89 draft, where he was selected by Washington. He was a great blocker in Washington, earning a Pro Bowl nod and helping Washington win a Super Bowl 26 over the Bills. Schlereth would move to the Broncos to play in Denver, and he'd make his second and final Pro Bowl. During his time there, he was a key piece to back-to-back Super Bowl wins, Super Bowl 32 over the Packers and 33 over the Falcons. Before his playing career ended, Schlereth would retire enduring 29 surgeries over his career. 20 of those performed on his knees. They said he had quite a pain threshold, obviously, but his body didn't always hold up. But Mark Schlereth had a great career, and the Broncos honored him, naming him to the Broncos' 50th anniversary team. Jumping to a current offensive tackle that wears 69, we're going back to the Broncos to talk about Mike McGlinchey. He was a stud playing at Notre Dame, where he earned consensus All-American his senior season, leading to the 49ers selecting him 9th overall in the 2018 draft. He started all regular season games as a rookie, earning all rookie team nods. And he'd deal with injuries in San Fran, but was always productive. And before the 23-24 season, McGlinchey signed a 5-year deal to join the Broncos. A lot of pressure on this new-look Broncos team this season, and a lot of success will come down to the blocking of McGlinchey. We'll wrap up the 69 NFL portion by going to another current player, Shaq Mason. Played football at Georgia Tech, where he earned first team All ACC and second team All ACC, leading to the Patriots selecting Mason in the fourth round of the 2015 NFL Draft. Split time on the offensive line, was a member of the Super Bowl 51 winning team that pulled off that huge comeback against the Atlanta Falcons. Mason would become a regular starter at guard the following season and was a key part of the Super Bowl 53 winning Patriots team that beat LA in the big game. After more time in New England, Mason would get sent to Tampa Bay, where he'd get reunited with quarterback Tom Brady. But after one season there, Mason was traded to the Texans, where he signed a 3-year deal. Lots of excitement for Houston fans lately, and Shaq Mason looks to help contribute to that, blocking for superstar on the rise, C.J. Stroud. Well, not even on the rise. C.J. Stroud's a superstar now. In Major League Baseball, there have been a few brief number 69s, but the biggest one that comes to mind is Bronson Arroyo. He wore it for 3 seasons to start his career off with the Pirates, but he wound up wearing 61 the rest of his career, which is why we already highlighted him back in episode 61. And much like other numbers in the 60s, a 69 has not been worn in the NBA, but not just because no one wants to. It's because the league banned from anyone from wearing the number. Being a family-friendly league, David Stern at the time decided to ban the number from being worn. The only time it was tried, Dennis Rodman signed with the Mavericks for the 99-2000 season, and a few jerseys were actually made up before, like I said, then Commissioner David Stern kiboshed that idea. And apparently there's a few rare number 69 Rodman jerseys out there. Apparently Mark Cuban's got one, so I bet they fetch a pretty penny. Which takes us to the NHL to wrap up the number 69 segment. The list is also short. 2 players have donned the jersey in the NHL. The first player to rock the number was Mel Angelstad. He wore it for 2 games in 03-04 with the Capitals. Andrew Desjardins wore the 69 his first 2 seasons in San Jose before switching to number 10. Desjardins would win the Stanley Cup in 2015 with the Blackhawks after he was traded there. After his time at Chicago, he wound up playing in Europe, where he still hasn't retired, but the 2 biggest 69s in hockey are probably the fictional ones from the Goon movies. If you haven't watched them, you really should. Sean William Scott plays hockey guru Doug Glatt, and he wears 69 in the movies, and that character was based off former minor league hockey player / fighter Doug Smith. And a fun fact, in the Goon, The Last of the Enforcers, a big fight goes down between Doug Glatt and the OG number 69 wearer Mel Angelstad, who we just mentioned earlier. The other big fictional 69, you might have heard the show Shoresy. We've seen him in Letterkenny, and he's a star on his own on the show bearing his name. Jared Keeso, the great Canadian actor, plays the role, but if you're looking for a 69 in hockey, you're better to look for it in movies and TV shows. And before we jump to more sports, sad news in the NFL, Jacoby Jones, 40 years old, passing away. Haven't heard all the details yet, but one of the best kick returners in the game, and just, wow, surprises. When that popped up, I was definitely surprised to see that. So hopefully his family's doing well with all that, and a lot of tributes coming out for him, so hopefully, yeah, he's able to rest there. Still 40 years old. That's way too young. But anyway, we'll continue with the sports of the week. We'll go to the footy world. The Euros, they came to a wrap up. Got to go to that. Last week I did a little quick Euro Copa America preview show. Some previews look good. Some predictions. Some not so much. France and Spain, that went down. France looked to start the game off with some more pep in their step than we've seen all tournament. The maskless Mbappe would get the ball on the wing. He'd cross it perfect, where Kolo Muani would push the ball into the net, giving France a 1-0 lead after 9 minutes. But it didn't last long. The 21st minute, Spain were on the attack, and Lamine Yamal had the ball at his feet. And then out of nowhere, what a strike. A beautiful strike. Putting it top corner, putting it outside of the keeper's reach. A wonderful goal by the 16-year-old. His first in the tournament, and what a first. Becoming the youngest player to ever score at the competition, smashing the record held by Switzerland's Johan van Lanthen. He scored a goal at the Euro 2004 at the age of 18, breaking the record set by Wayne Rooney, who was also 18 just a few days earlier. Things began to unravel for France after Spain's first goal. 4 minutes later, Spain was in the attack. A cross into the box was half cleared, right to Dani Olmo, who showed off his control and fired his shot into the little corner. Koundé tried to redirect it, but almost shot at too much pace and found the back of the net. I thought an own goal would be a harsh decision, but the French defender was credited with the own goal, the most prolific scorer of the tournament. There'd be no more goals in the match despite France's pressure. Spain won 2-1, advancing to the finals. where, as we'll get to, it was a dandy. And the other big semi-final, the English and the Dutch. We get an early goal in this one. The Netherlands forced a turnover in the England end, and Simons would pick up the ball and unleash a rocket. Found the back of the net. The Netherlands led 1-0 after just 7 minutes. Not long after, there'd be a call for penalty. It would get looked at, and England would get that penalty where Captain Harry Kane would score from the spot, tying the game at 1 after 18 minutes. Only 4 minutes later, Phil Foden would dance around players and look to score, but Dumfries was able to clear it off the line. Just before the half-hour mark, the Netherlands got a chance. Dumfries would hit the crossbar, though. Then Phil Foden would curl a beauty, but it would strike the post. And despite all this action, the game stayed 1-1. Memphis Depay, who's looked great for the Netherlands in this tournament, would have to get subbed out due to injury. And then with the game late, managers making some changes. Cole Palmer coming on for Phil Foden, and he'd immediately score. However, the goal did not count. Offsides, i.e. Harry Kane would get subbed out for Ollie Watkins, who was barely played in the tournament. And then just before the 90-minute mark, Rice found substitute Palmer, who spotted fellow substitute Watkins, who's done many times for Aston Villa this past season, turned and fired into the corner, giving England the lead just before stoppage time. Big 2-1 dramatic victory, giving everyone its coming home feelings as we went to the final between Spain and England. Not a lot of chances in the first half. The game didn't. Everybody was more in defensive mode, and we go into the halftime scoreless. And Spain looked like they'd be in trouble as one of their best players all tournament, Rodri, would have to get substituted out of the game to start the second half, being replaced with Martin Zubimendi. But I don't know what the pep talks were like, but Spain must have had a better one. They came out of the locker room ready to go, while England looked a little casual. Lamine Yamal's cross would miss Dani Olmo, but find its way to Nico Williams, who smashed the ball in the back of the net, opening the scoring, giving Spain the 1-0 lead after 47 minutes. Not even 90 seconds later, Spain almost scored again. Dani Olmo barely missed the net. And around the half-hour mark, Gareth Southgate decided to make changes. England bringing off their all-time leading goal scorer, Harry Kane, for Ollie Watkins. But to be fair, Harry Kane looked pretty non-existent in the match. And Ollie Watkins just had scored that winner in the semifinals, as I mentioned, and it'd be Spain to get another chance. Lamine Yamal, who just turned 17 on Saturday, so he's no longer 16, try a low attempt that forced a big save out of Jordan Pickford. Spain would remove their captain, Alvaro Morata, for Mikel Oyarzabal. England's Cole Palmer would come on for... No quiet entrance for Cole Palmer. He'd get the ball outside the box, and with one of his first touches of the game, he'd smash a low shot into the corner, tying the game at 1 after 73 minutes. Wonderful strike by the 22-year-old Chelsea forward, and the game seemed to go back in the passive mode for a hot second until Spain cranked it up again. Yamal forced Pickford to another great save. Spain would switch things up a bit, bring in Nacho for Robin Landnormand, and Spain would keep the pressure up, and they would find a second goal. Mikel Oyarzabal would cap off a counterattack with the substitute putting in a wonderful cross by Cucurella, and that gave Spain the lead at 2-1 after 86 minutes. More changes to the game. Phil Foden was taken off for Ivan Toney. Lots of changes, and England was really pushing. Declan Rice's header was saved by Unai Simon, and the rebound came to Marguehi, who headed it towards the net. But Dani Olmo proves he can do more than just score and pass. He cleared the line, and the score stayed 2-1, which is how it would end. Another tournament that England thought it was coming home, but came up a little short. Spain won their 4th European Championship, the first country to host that title 4 times, putting them one ahead of Germany as they surpassed Germany on German soil. You have to give credit to Spain, though. They looked the best team in pretty much this whole tournament. They were looking good the whole way, and they're still so young. They're going to be a force to be reckoned with going forward. And they took home some individual awards. Spanish midfielder Rodri, who was injured in the final, was named player of the tournament. And no surprise, Barcelona youngster, teenager Lamine Yamal won Young Player of the Tournament. England's Harry Kane and Spain's Dani Olmo did not score in the final, which means the Golden Boot will get split. I'm not sure how it works, but no tiebreaker this year, so the Golden Boot shared by 6 players who each scored 3 goals. I mean, we couldn't give the trophy to own goals, so I mentioned those 2 players earlier, Kane and Dani Olmo. Also include Georgia's Mikitadze, Netherlands' Cody Gakpo, Slovakia's Ivan Schranz, and Germany's Jamal Musiala. A great tournament there. As an England supporter, I wish it ended a little different. England are now 0-2 in Euro finals, losing to Italy in the last competition. and now Spain in 2004. Very interested to see what Gareth Southgate does going forward with this English team if he sticks around. So from the Euros to the Copa, what a semifinals. Argentina and Canada facing off for the second time. Argentina had won the first match in group play, and Canada was looking to pull off the upset of upsets. Canada started off well. Schaffelberg had a good chance, but missed badly. And as the game progressed, you could see the skill of the current World Cup holders. Rodrigo de Paul would spot Julian Alvarez, who was wide open in between Canadian defenders, and the Man City man put it right through the legs of Maxime Crepeau, opening the scoring after 22 minutes, and Argentina led 1-0 going into halftime. But Argentina liked to do a little delay before it coming out, which they've known to do on this tournament. But once they hit the pitch, they acted quickly in getting second goal. A wild scramble in front of the Canadian net led to the ball coming to Enzo Fernandez. His shot was deflected in front of the keeper by Lionel Messi, giving the icon his first goal of the tournament. And I'm like, whoa, that looked offside, but the replay showed Canadian defender Derek Cornelius playing Messi on. The goal stood, and Argentina led 2-0 after 51 minutes. Jonathan David had a disappointing game, and the striker was removed for Tani Oluwase in the 64th minute. And later in the half, Alphonso Davies would be on the receiving end of a harsh tackle, where of course there was no call, but he'd get substituted out. Canada substitutes brought new life to the games. Tani would miss two great chances in front of the net to bring Canada back into it. And Canada's frustrations were starting to show after another fall down by Rodrigo de Paul. Ismail Kone kicked the ball off his back, prompting de Paul to act as if he got shot, flailing around on the ground. It's tough to sell the game when people are doing stuff like that, but Argentina held on to the 2-0 win, punched their ticket to the Copa America final. Second straight Copa America finals as the all-time leading team to win it. And they were looking pretty good. And who would they play? Well, Uruguay and Colombia met up. And this was a feisty one, as I predicted in my preview show last week. Bentancur would sustain an injury, and the Uruguayan great player had to get subbed out. Colombia would crank up the pressure, and James Rodriguez would send a lovely cross into the box where it was met by Jefferson Lerma. His header put Colombia up 1-0 in the 39th minute, and not even 5 minutes later, Colombia's Daniel Munoz would get involved in an altercation, and he'd elbow a Uruguayan player in the chest, resulting in his second yellow card of the match, and he was dismissed, and Colombia would have to go into the second half a man down. And we'd have more feisty play, where Colombia had a chance to seal it late by Uribe's shot was stopped by Roche. Uruguay had a few chances late, but could not find the equalizer, and Colombia took the 1-0 win, advancing to the finals where they'd set up a date with Argentina. After the loss, it was quite the scene. The Uruguayan players were going into the crowd. It looked crazy. Uruguayan captain Jose Jimenez explained that the Colombian fans created an avalanche around the Uruguayan players' families, and it's scary when the players have to go up and defend their own families in the stands. Not sure of what kind of suspensions will come out of this or fines, but not a good look for CONMEBOL, who's been seeing all kinds of weird looks. We'll get to some more in a bit here, but we have to go to the third place game first. Unlike the Euros, Copa America has a third place game where Canada took on Uruguay, hoping to pull off an upset. And Uruguay went through a lot of dramatic shit in the end of that semifinal last, so we didn't know where they'd be at, but they got added to a better start. An early Uruguay corner kick led to Rodrigo Bentancur, who was healthy enough to play in this one, and he found the back of the net, beating keeper Dane St. Clair, who was getting his first start of the tournament. Uruguay up 1-0 after 8 minutes, but in the 22nd minute, Canada would have a corner kick, and Ismail Kone would pull off a great over-the-head kick, finding the back of the net, tying the game at 1, and the game would have some more chances, but we go in the halftime 1-1. Where Canada even had more chances, but they could not finish. They would find the back of the net, though, in the 80th minute. Ismail Kone went on a heck of a run, tried a long-distance shot, forcing a big save by Sergio Roche, and the ball fell to Jonathan David, who calmly found the back of the net, putting Canada up 2-1 in the 80th minute. It looked like the upset was in the palm of their hands. But Uruguayan legend Luis Suarez would score in the 92nd minute. The 37-year-old substitute put a lovely touch on the game that, put them up and set it up. tie the game up and send it to penalties, where each of the first two scorers found the back of the net. But Canada's third shooter, Ismail Kone, tried the stutter step, did not help him. His low, soft shot was denied. Next two shot takers make their attempts, leading to Alphonso Davies, the Canadian captain, try to Panenka, and he had the keeper dive the wrong way, but he hit the crossbar. Uruguay won on penalties 4-3, securing third place in the tournament. Not the result they were looking for coming in, but a solid finish for the Marcelo Bielsa side, who at some points looked to be the best team in the tournament. And if you haven't seen Marcelo Bielsa's speech about the play on the pitches in the States and how unprepared everything is, the training's no good, how they're not allowed to speak up against anything, how football is falling apart because of these. It's a great, passionate speech. I love him as a manager. And how about Jesse March? Have to be proud of the performance of the new Canadian manager. Barely been with the squad, getting him all the way to the Copa America semifinals. Beaming with proud as a Canadian. I mean, I'm not wearing the right jersey for it now, but we'll get more to that. I can't wait to see where Canada footy goes forward. So that brought us to the Copa American final, Argentina and Colombia. And much like the Euro Cup final, it went down Sunday. However, there was an hour and 20-minute delay to start this Copa America final. The scenes before the game were chaotic as best. The idea was to open all the gates at once to avoid any kind of trampling, but what you ended up getting was a flooding of people that security had no chance of dealing with. Many people without tickets getting into the game. You combine that with people climbing fences, sneaking in through the ventilation system. Yeah, there's videos shared on Twitter of people going in through the ducts, like groundskeeper Willie in The Simpsons there. It was crazy, utter chaos. Officials ended up shutting the gates, leaving actual ticket owners outside the game. A stadium spokesman said, I quote, "We understand there are disappointed ticket holders who were not able to enter the stadium after the perimeter was closed, and we will work in partnership with CONMEBOL to address those individual concerns. Ultimately, there is nothing more important than the health and safety of all our guests and staff, and that will always remain our priority." Okay, that last bit seems a little off now. Health and safety seem to be an afterthought in that anarchy. So if you have not checked out any video of that pregame madness, check it out. A really rough go for American security over the weekend. The scenes at the Hard Rock Stadium and the attempted assassination of presidential candidate, convicted felon Donald Trump. But those are all minor things on the grand scale when in comparison to what's still happening in Gaza, free Gaza. It's been months and months of murder. I know I talk tons of sports and try to encourage everyone to watch, but we need to try to do our part to influence the end of this genocide that still, like I said, for months has been going on. But from the scariness of the real world to our Copa America final, like I said, hour and 20-minute delay to the game, but we finally get our kickoff. The crowd was obviously rowdy with nowhere to sit for some. But there wasn't a lot of action in the first half. Both teams feeling each other out. The biggest play of the first half was late in the first half where Messi looked to roll his ankle. It looked like he may get subbed off, but he stayed in the game. And the second half, things were opening up. A few more chances, but around the hour mark, Messi would go down again, and he'd have to get subbed out. He would limp to the sidelines to a standing ovation. You could see the emotion on his face, as this could potentially be the last time he suits up for Argentina in a big tournament. He was replaced by Nico Gonzalez, and like later in the game, they panned to Messi's ankle. Oh, it swelled up like meat and all-you-can-eat buffet. It was so big. It was you could see the toughness of the dude. He tried to play. He just could not run on that anymore. And, at the 90 minutes, we're coming to the end. Colombia made some big moves, bringing off superstar James Rodriguez, Richard Rios, and Jean Cordoba, and this game would go to extra time. And the only game that can go to extra time in tournament is the final. Like we've talked throughout in this tournament, every game went straight to penalties except for the final. And in the first period of extra time, more big changes. Argentina removed Premier League stars Julian Alvarez, Alexis McAllister, and Enzo Fernandez, replacing them with Lautaro Martinez, Leandro Paredes, and Giovanni Lo Celso. Colombia then changing up their roster more, bringing off Liverpool's Luis Diaz, John Arias, and Jefferson Lerma. A lot of eyes were looking at penalties, but that opened the door for complacency, and the Argentina substitutes took advantage. Lo Celso's one-touch pass found Lautaro Martinez, who took the pass and blasted into the back of the net, giving Argentina the 1-0 lead after 112 minutes. A stunning goal to open the scoring so deep into the match. Soon after, Angel Di Maria would get subbed off to a standing ovation and was probably his last time suiting up for his country. And Argentina would hold on to take the 1-0 win, winning the Copa America, Argentina fans there, and back-to-back tournaments with a World Cup victory sandwich in the middle. Like I said, we're witnessing greatness from this Argentina squad. It was Argentina's 16th Copa America win, the most of any nation, putting them one ahead of Uruguay, who's now second with 15. Argentina's super sub most of the tournament. Lautaro Martinez finishing with the golden boot, 5 goals, which had 3 of them coming off the bench, including the game winner in the final, was enough to win the award by himself. Not a 6-way tie for a boot like the Euros. How do you share a boot 6 ways, honestly? But anyway, despite the loss in the finals, Colombia's James Rodriguez won player of the tournament, winning the golden ball. His 6 assists were 4 higher than anyone else, and he also had a goal in the tournament. A great run for a guy that everyone called washed up coming into the tournament. He looked fantastic, just not the ending he was looking for. Another great footy tournament in the books, one that may get overshadowed a bit for lack of security in the final, and FIFA really needs to take a hard look at how the United States hosted Copa America and rectify those issues going into the 2026 World Cup, which will be hosted by the United States, Canada, and Mexico. From footy to the racetrack, there was none this past weekend, but the weekend before shows how long Ren City's been off here. But we went to Silverstone, the British Grand Prix. Tough qualifying for Sergio Perez and Red Bull, where he got hung up and didn't even get out of Q1. Max Verstappen, he got off the track a bit too, but he was able to survive Q1. Charles Leclerc didn't survive Q2. But how about the English drivers excelling on their home court, starting 1, 2, 3 in the race? First time ever at Silverstone. Team Mercedes' George Russell earned his second pole of the season, starting in the front row with teammate Lewis Hamilton. Third spot, McLaren's Lando Norris, who started next to Red Bull's Max Verstappen. Behind them was Lando's teammate Oscar Piastri, and surprisingly, Haas's Nico Hülkenberg. Going to the Grand Prix on Sunday, you could see the clouds in the distance, as it always seems to happen in the UK. And to start the race, Max passed Lando and took the third spot. 15 laps in, Lando showed off a great move to pass Max and take it back. But then the rain would start. It was a light rain, but there were numerous warnings the rain would increase. And around the 18th lap, Lewis Hamilton was closing his gap on his teammate, and he passed Russell to take first place of the race. And Mercedes ended up having to leave the track for a moment, and that gave Lando time to catch up, passing Russell to move in the second. On the 20th, Lando would pass Lewis to take the lead. McLaren showed off their grip as Piastri passed Russell, and we suddenly sat McLaren, Mercedes, until Piastri passed Lewis, and suddenly McLaren were leading the race here. Some drivers switched to intermediate tires to beat the rain, but the rain didn't really come, and you had some pissed off drivers, mainly Perez and Ferrari's Leclerc. But the second wave of rain came, and people were running to the pits for intermediates. Only Piastri stayed out, and he'd come in a lap later, which really didn't help him. And so the following lap, Piastri would enter the pits, and he'd drop all the way to 6th, and Lando would take the leader's spot. Now on the 34th, while sitting in 4th, George was instructed to go to the pits and retire the car. A lot of questions as you couldn't see what was happening, but I guess it was a water system issue, and you could hear the heartbreak on Russell as he had to retire the car. The 37th lap, the sun came out, and it felt like summer, and the cars went to the pits to get off those intermediates. There was a fury of vehicles in the busy pits, and the only missing car was Lando, who would decide to stop on the next lap. And it was a long stop, going 4 seconds, 2 seconds longer than usual. So as he came out of the pits, you had Lewis Hamilton sneaking ahead of Lando, who now sat second, followed by Verstappen, Piastri, and Sainz. Verstappen was on the hard tires, while leaders Lewis and Lando were on softs, and as the race progressed, Max was making up ground quickly, and we were in for a wacky ending. As the 48th lap was ending, Max would pass Lando to move in the second place with 4 laps to try and catch his old rival Lewis Hamilton. He couldn't catch him, though, and Hamilton would hold on to win his 9th British Grand Prix, 104th career win, ending his 50-race streak without a win. You could see the emotion on Hamilton's face as he finally picked up a win in his swan song year with Mercedes. No F1 this past weekend, but upcoming this weekend as the teams head to Hungary, taking place at the Hungaroring for the Hungarian Grand Prix. That should be an exciting one. We'll see how Lewis comes off his first win and how Red Bull responds after not getting a win. Stick in the UK, going to South London, which I love to visit, for some Wimbledon, and I got a little wild with my Canadian praise last episode. Like I said, it was a bit ago, and the Ren City jinx lived on. Praise Bianca Andreescu, and she lost her next match, following straight sets to Jasmine Pellini. She looked good in the first set, but dropped it in the tiebreak and really fell apart. And on continuing on the women's side, there were more shocking results. Ons Jabeur lost to Svitolina in the third round. Round of 16, local favorite Raducanu lost to Lulu Sun in 3 sets. Madison Keys was in a great match with Polini. Things tied at 5 in the third and deciding set, but Keys suffered a hamstring injury. You could see the emotion on her face as she had to withdraw from the match. Perhaps the biggest upset on the women's side, number 19, Emma Navarro beating number 2 Coco Gauff in straight sets. I thought this might have been Gauff's tournament to win, but the American was sent home after the round of 16 loss. Another tough loss for the American women in the round of 16. Danielle Collins lost in straight sets to Barbara Krejcikova. And the quarterfinals continue with Lulu Sun taking on Donna Vekic, where the Croatian came back to beat Sun in 3 sets, despite losing the first set of the match. Jasmine Polini took on American Emma Navarro in another quarterfinal match, and the latter match I mentioned was a beatdown with Polini dominating, winning in straight sets. Love watching her play. She packs so much in a small frame there. The other quarterfinal had Ostapenko losing to Krejcikova in straight sets, and the highest-ranked player remaining, Alina Rybakina, defeated Svitolina in straight sets as well, setting up an interesting semifinal matches, where Rybakina won the first set against Krejcikova, only for Krejcikova to win the next 2 sets and take the match 2-1. The other semifinal featured Donna Vekic taking on number 7 Jasmine Polini, and it was a thrilling semifinal as well, where Vekic dominated Polini in the first set, but Polini battled back, took the next 6-4, setting up a thrilling set that needed a tiebreak where Polini would pull off the dramatic comeback, winning the match 2-1, setting up a final between Polini and Barbara Krejcikova. And this final featured one Grand Slam winner, like I said, Krejcikova. She had won the French Open in 2021, and Polini was looking for her first Grand Slam, coming off fresh off a Grand Slam final a few months ago where she lost in the French Open finals to Swiatek. This game was dominated by Krejcikova out of the gates. Her serve was unbeatable, and she grabbed the first 10 of 11 points in the match. She almost looked a little miffed at the very pro-Polini crowd, not giving her much love, but regardless, she took the first set 6-2, which prompted Polini to run to the locker room in between sets. Whatever she did in the locker room worked. She came out a different player, showing that big punch in that small frame. Krejcikova looked a whole different player, lacking it. You know, her confidence didn't look there that she had in the first set. That combination led to Polini taking the set 6-2, setting up a third and deciding set for the championship. This time it was Krejcikova's time to go to the locker room, and Polini was riding that momentum, taking the first game in the set. But Krejcikova's serve seemed to return, and both players exchanged serve-winning games till we'd see our first break of the set. Krejcikova broke Polini to take a 4-3 lead. Her serve was killing it again. She'd go up 5-3. Polini got back with her serve, and Krejcikova would have a chance to serve for the championship. She'd have a few championship points. Polini would have a few break points. The back and forth was crazy, but it would end up with Krejcikova getting the point, winning the Wimbledon championship. Like I said, the second Grand Slam of her career, her first Wimbledon, one she will never forget. And man, how about a hell of a run for Polini, who had won over the crowd. And what a summer she's having. Like I said, 2 Grand Slam finals, coming up short in both. But wow, really shows you how tough of a tournament this has been on the ladies' side the last few years, since we really lost the domination of the Williams. But it was the first time since 2001 that both semifinals and the final went to a third and deciding set. And it's the 8th different winner in 8 years, which is astounding for Wimbledon. This is a stretch that's never been done in the history of its illustrious tournament history. On the men's side, again, the Canadian jinx was running strong when I was pumping up Denis Shapovalov, and he went in a third-round bout with American youngster Ben Shelton. This was a great game that went to a 5th set, but Shelton held on for the win. Shap showed off some great play despite falling in the third round. And we'll stick with Shelton because he continued on and faced number 1 ranked tennis player Jannik Sinner, who won the first 2 sets, and the third set went to a tiebreak where Sinner would end up holding on for the win. Daniil Medvedev was set up for a tough round of 16 match with Grigor Dimitrov, but after only 8 games, Grigor would have to retire. He slipped on the grass and hurt himself, received some treatment, but he'd have to withdraw. Perhaps the biggest upset on the men's side, number 13 American Taylor Fritz, shocking number 4 in the world, Alexander Zverev. Fritz was down 2-0, but reeled off 3 straight to beat the German, and one of the biggest wins of his career thus far. Number 2 ranked player Novak Djokovic beat Rune in straight sets and let the crowd know about it, saying he didn't appreciate the booing, and he said, "Have a good night to everyone." The quarterfinal had it was looking pretty good. Number 1 ranked player in the world, Jannik Sinner, faced off with Medvedev, and it was a great match that went the distance, with Medvedev winning in 5 sets, a back and forth match that featured 2 sets going to a tiebreak in that one. The other quarterfinal that day had Carlos Alcaraz facing off with American Tommy Paul, where Paul shocked Alcaraz by winning the first set. The Spaniard woke up and reeled off 3 straight to win the victory. The other quarterfinals went in different directions. Australian Alex de Minaur had to withdraw from this quarterfinal match with Djokovic. He picked up an injury in his 4th round win, and it got to the point where he could barely walk, giving Djokovic a walkover to his record-tying 13th Wimbledon semifinal. Lorenzo Musetti took on Taylor Fritz in a thriller. Fritz won the first set. Musetti won the next 2. Fritz won the 4th to force a 5th. But the American struggled in the final set. Number 25 ranked Lorenzo Musetti would take the win and advance to the semifinals. When the semifinals went down, we had a juicy matchup between Medvedev and Alcaraz. And the first set was feisty. That could have ended early. After a call he didn't like, Medvedev said something to the chair judge. I couldn't make it all out, but you could definitely see fuck in his words. And that prompted her to talk to the supervisor when the outburst almost caused Medvedev to get defaulted. But it was just called a warning, and the match continued. And the first set was back and forth, with Medvedev winning it in a tiebreaker. But from there, Carlos Alcaraz would turn it up, and it wasn't that Medvedev was playing that bad, just that Alcaraz was hitting anything and everything. Anytime you thought he was out on a point, he'd turn it around, leaving you scratching your head. He'd take the next 3 sets, winning the match and advancing to his 2nd straight Wimbledon final. The other semifinal had Lorenzo Musetti taking on Djokovic. It was well battled, but Novak won in 3 straight sets, setting up the final we all wanted, a rematch of last year's. Carlos Alcaraz and Novak Djokovic. You had, this was the big Sunday of Sundays. You had the Euros going down, followed by the Copa America final. But how would you start it? With a Wimbledon's final. Like I said, the 21-year-old from Spain, Carlos Alcaraz, 37-year-old legend who has the most Grand Slams on the men's side, Novak Djokovic. But the beginning of this match surprised you a bit. Not to the fact Alcaraz was playing phenomenal, but it was more the lackluster play from Djokovic. Alcaraz cruised to a 6-2 first set win, and in the second set, he broke Novak to start the set and ran away with that one, winning at 6-2. In the third, we'd finally see the Djokovic we're used to seeing. He kept it much more competitive, but the shot making of Alcaraz was top-notch. This set went back and forth, requiring a tiebreak, where Alcaraz would get the winning point, winning the match on straight sets, winning back-to-back Wimbledon championships, adding a 4th Grand Slam to his ever-growing trophy case. His 2 Wimbledon trophies go with the 2022 U.S. Open and 2024 French Open. And did I mention he's only 21? Only 3 other male tennis players have won 4 Grand Slams at 21 and under. Mats Wilander, Bjorn Borg, and Boris Becker. Carlos Alcaraz is one of the most exciting players on the planet right now, and he'll be looking for his 3rd Grand Slam of the season when the U.S. Open takes place next month. Which takes us to baseball. We fly with the Jays in Toronto, and last episode's airing way back yonder. The Jays were looking to avoid a series loss to the Astros, but they proceeded to lose the 4th game 5-3 and drop that series 3-1. Toronto would then go out west to take on the Mariners. In the first game, we had a great pitching bout between Blue Jays' Kevin Gausman and Seattle's Luis Castillo. Gausman had 10 strikeouts, Castillo had 8. Not a lot of hitting, but the Mariners did a little more and took the opening game 2-1. The Blue Jays got another good pitching start, this time by Yariel Rodriguez. The Cuban pitcher went 6 innings strong, allowing 1 hit and striking out 6 along the way, becoming just the 8th pitcher in Jays history to have an outing of 6 innings and 1 or fewer hits in his first 7 starts. You get some help from the Jays offense in that one, and the Jays were up comfortably 5-0 in the bottom of the 8th, but if you watch the Jays, you know nothing's really comfortable late. And in the bottom of the 8th, relief pitcher Trevor Richards gave up a 3-run home run, who in one swing made it 5-3. And then the bottom of the 9th, Chad Green would be pitching Toronto, and he'd give up a solo bomb. In no time, the Mariners went from down 5-0 to 5-4, but the Jays would do enough to hold on and take the win, tying that series. The rubber match featured 2 great pitchers again, Jose Barrios taking on George Kirby. You might remember us talking about last episode in Jersey Mention 68. Get a couple of hits early in the game. 23-year-old Leo Jimenez would get his first career MLB hit. Congrats to him. And the game went back and forth where we need extra innings, and Dalton Varsho would hit a game-winning RBI. Big win for the Jays as they take 2 out of 3 in the Mariners. Jays stayed out west for a 3-game series and some interleague play where the Jays took on the Giants. A good pitching matchup with UC Kikuchi going up against Blake Snell. Jays led 3-1, but that bullpen faltered again for the Jays. Trevor Richards would come in and do what Trevor Richards has done for the Jays lately, give up late runs. Gave up a game-tying single to Brett Wesley in the bottom of the ninth, and the game was tied at 3, where Richards does not help his cause, or in the same inning he threw a wild pitch that would enable Fitzgerald to score from third. A walk-off wild pitch that gave the Giants a 4-3 win. The second meeting, the Giants and Jays would find themselves in an early 2-0 hole after the first inning, but the backs woke up and they would end up winning 10-6 in that one. The Jays would wrap up their series in the San Fran with Gossman taking the mound against former Blue Jay Jordan Hicks. Both players were hit off early, but the Jays did some clutch hitting later in the game. It would have preserved the 5-3 win, winning 2 out of 3 in that West Coast series. Jays kept their interleague play going in the western United States, take on the Arizona Diamondbacks over the weekend. The Jays look poised to win the first game of the series, but again, another bullpen letdown. It's been a tough go for Trevor Richards lately. He gave up a 2-run single in the 8th to let Arizona tie things up. Then Chad Green gave off a walk-off sac fly. Tough 5-4 loss to open that series. The second game was just ugly. Not a good outing for Jose Berrios or any Blue Jays pitcher, really, as Arizona cruised to a 12-1 win. And the final game of the series was a roller coaster ride. Another great pitching matchup with Kikuchi and Zach Gallen. But you wouldn't have thought, as the Jays scored 6 runs in the 4th, only for the Diamondbacks to score 7 in the 5th. A game that had plenty of hitting, and the Jays actually held on to win 8-7, avoiding a sweep in the desert. And that'll be their last group of games for the All-Star break. Before I jump into a dive in the standings of the divisions like I do, let's talk about that All-Star break real quick. On Sunday, the MLB draft began, the 4th year in a row that was taking place during the All-Star festivities. The opening night of the draft started Sunday with more picks getting selected over the next few days. First overall pick of this year's draft went to the Cleveland Guardians, and they selected Australian-born second baseman Travis Bazzana out of Oregon State. Seems like a fantastic hitter, and it's always interesting to see how these number 1 overall picks pan out. Number 2, the Reds selected right-handed pitcher Chase Byrne out of Wake Forest. Colorado Rockies selected third baseman Charlie Condon out of Georgia. Oakland A's selected first baseman Nick Kirst out of Wake Forest, 2 of the top 4 picks coming from the university. And the Chicago White Sox selected left-handed pitcher Hagen Smith out of Arkansas to round out the top 5. The Blue Jays were thrilled to get right-handed pitcher Trey Savage out of East Carolina. The reliever became his starter, has been on the radar of the Jays for some time, and they were happy to get him. The draft will continue over the next few days until all 20 rounds are completed. Today, Monday, July 15th, we'll get to witness the MLB Home Run Derby. The participants include New York Mets' Pete Alonso, Phillies' Alec Bohm, Rangers' Adolis Garcia, Baltimore's Gunnar Henderson, LA Dodger Teoscar Hernandez, Braves' Marcel Osuna, Guardians' Jose Ramirez, and Kansas City Royal Bobby Witt Jr. I'm going with the Rangers' Adolis Garcia to win this one. Then on Tuesday, we get the mid-season classic with the American League facing off the National League. Should be a fun one. This isn't always a fun all-star game out of the big 4 sports there. With that being said, last episode I mentioned the starters in the all-star game. They did announce the rest of the squad, and we got some first-timers. Some pitchers in the American League who will be making their debut. White Sox Garrett Crochet, Seattle's Logan Gilbert, Boston's Tanner Hook, Kansas City's Seth Lugo, episode 67 mentioned there. Oakland's Mason Miller, KC's Cole Reagans, and Detroit's Tarek Skubal. On the National League side, all eyes will be on number 1 overall pick, rookie Paul Skeens. The exciting Pirates rookie has been even more bringing more excitement to the games, as it was announced Skeens will start the All-Star game, becoming the first Pirates pitcher in nearly 50 years to start the game. The other first-time NL starting pitchers include Dodgers' Tyler Glasnow, Hunter Green, San Diego's Robert Suarez, San Francisco's Logan Webb, Chicago Cubs' Shota Imanga, Atlanta's Reynaldo Lopez, and Miami's Tanner Scott. I feel bad I didn't get to mention Scott in episode 66 as that was running long, but he deserves the mention now in making his first All-Star appearance. The Phillies also have 3 first-time All-Stars from their pitching stable. Jeff Hoffman, Matt Strahm, and Ranger Suarez will be making their All-Star debut. So I talked to the Jays. Let's look at the American League East. The Jays find themselves in the basement of the division, 14 games back at the division-leading Orioles. Many people in baseball are predicting that unless the Jays go on a monumental run, they could become sellers at the deadline. Pending free agents: Justin Turner, Kevin Kiermaier, Yusei Kikuchi, Yimi Garcia, Trevor Richards. He might not get much right now, and Danny Jansen all becoming available. Others are suggesting this window on the Blue Jays may be closed, and the team should move either on from Vladimir Guerrero Jr. or Bo Bichette. I don't know if I'm there yet, though, but I mean, this season has been pretty disappointing thus far. But continuing on with the AL East, I mentioned the Orioles sitting atop the division. They have only a one-game advantage over the second-place Yankees. Orioles have not looked their best lately. They won 2 or 3 against the A's, but gave up 19 runs in the one loss. They followed that up by getting swept by the Chicago Cubs. Then they met with divisional foes, the Yankees, where the Orioles narrowly avoided a sweep, winning the finale and ending a 5-game losing skid. Mentioned the Yankees just behind Baltimore in the division. The Yankees haven't been playing too great either. They were swept by Cincinnati, dropped 2 or 3 to the Sox, 2 or 3 against the Rays, but they did win 2 or 3 against Baltimore, which closed the gap a little bit in that division. And I mentioned the Red Sox giving the Yankees fits. They're only 4.5 games back of the Orioles now and have been looking good. The Rays are closer to the Jays in the division with a 4-game edge over the Jays in the cellar of the division. But the big news involving Tampa Bay is former All-Star Wander Franco. The shortstop's been formally charged with sexually abusing a 14-year-old girl in the Dominican Republic. The indictment also includes the girl's mother, who, according to prosecutors, Franco paid the girl's mother thousands of dollars to consent to the abuse, which lasted for months. The girl's mother remains under house arrest and faces money laundering charges. The most serious charges that Franco will be facing are rape, for which he could receive sentences of 10 to 15 years, as well as human trafficking, which is punishable in the Dominican Republic by sentences of 15 to 20 years. The identity of the woman and her daughter remain private, but man, this is a disturbing story that when the news broke last year, we didn't know where it would go. Not even a year before this came out, Tampa Bay gave Franco an 11-year, $182 million contract. But with the latest announcements, Major League Baseball has placed Franco on its restricted list, cutting off any pay that Franco might have been receiving under administrative leave. But that takes us to the AL Central, where the Guardians still lead the tough division. They have a 4.5-game advantage over the Minnesota Twins. Kansas City Royals, I mentioned some of their first-time All-Stars, and they sit a few games behind the Twins. Tigers have been playing some lights-out baseball lately, and they find themselves only 3 games under 500 now, but they're still pretty far back of the division, a bit far of Cleveland. They are ahead of the White Sox, though, and the White Sox season has been a struggle. They have the worst record in Major League Baseball, and the only team yet to achieve 30 wins this season. Wrapping up the American League, we go out west where the Mariners are still leading the division, but it isn't by much. The Mariners' recent struggles combined with the great play of Houston has the Mariners leading the division down to just 1 game. The Astros aren't the only team hot in Texas. The Rangers have been playing some great ball and find themselves 5 games back. The Angels have played a little bit better of lately and find themselves 10 back in the division, but that's still better than the basement-dwelling Athletics. We've had a few surprising wins over the last week, including that throttling they gave the Orioles I mentioned. Which brings us to the National League, where we'll stay in the West, starting with NL West leading LA Dodgers. Dodgers still have a big lead in the division, but the gap has been closing a bit. The Dodgers lost 2 or 3 to the Brewers and were swept by the Phillies in Philadelphia. They then lost 2 or 3 in Detroit. But despite those struggles, they still lead the division by 7 games over the Padres. But don't forget the Diamondbacks. They played better ball, and they find themselves equal with the Padres in that division. And the Giants are fighting to stay relevant. They're only 9 games back, just a few games back of those teams I mentioned. The Rockies are trying to play better ball, but they're in a tough division and still reside in the basement of the NL West. From the West to the NL Central, I've said it before on this podcast throughout the season, but the NL Central may be home of the most entertaining division in baseball this year. The Brewers still lead the division, but their lead isn't too large, mainly because of how hot St. Louis had been lately. They're only 4.5 games back in the division, and it's pretty good for St. Louis considering how their season started. The Pirates, Red, and Cubs are all sitting around the same record, though, and all 3 of those teams exciting to watch. The Pirates have Skeens, the Reds have the unreal play of Ellie De La Cruz, and the Cubs, who have been so streaky this season, are streaking in the right time. I mean, I mentioned they were on the brink of sweeping the Orioles, and they did sweep them, and one of the most exciting divisions in baseball this season. First place to last place, 8.5 game difference. Wrapping up the division check-ins, we go to the NL East. The Philadelphia Phillies are still running away with the division. They have a massive 8.5 game lead over the injury-riddled Braves. Braves are still battling despite their injuries, and although they could get 1 of 3 against the Phillies, they are still in a hunt for a wild card. Overcoming the NL leading Phillies could be a tough task for the Mets, who are above 500 as they continue their great play. Nationals have struggled and they've fallen the division, but their saving grace is how awful the Marlins have been. They have the worst record in the National League, and things don't look to be getting better anytime soon. Quick mention of golf. Keep your eyes on Scotland this weekend. The Open takes place at the Royal Troon Golf Club. Always one of the most exciting majors to watch. The weather is always a factor, and you'll see some crazy looking shots. The rough terrain makes the professional golfers occasionally look like us casuals. In usual British Open style, we'll probably see a new winner of the tournament. We have not seen someone win their second British Open since Ernie Els won his second in 2012. We've seen nothing but first-time winners since then, starting with last year's winner, Brian Harman, Cameron Smith, Colin Morikawa, Shane Lowry, Francisco Molinari, Jordan Spieth, Henrik Stenson, Zach Johnson, Rory McIlroy, and Phil Mickelson. So your best bet for predicting this year's winner is putting all the names on a dartboard and seeing who your dart lands on. But I'm going to say this is the year we get a second-time winner in the event, breaking this long streak. I'm going with Rory McIlroy, getting over that dreadful missed putt at the U.S. Open. Adversity builds character, and Rory's got it. But hey, that's the sports. Let's get to the short here. For this short, this one I got to talk about this one. It was a controversial, but I did my research and I think I can talk about it okay here. This is a court appearance I had recently. Nothing against me, but I was summoned as a witness. And last year, after coming home from work, we usually get in our routine and change after work, but we saw this dude spray painting a car, like a nice Porsche, right next to the house, fresh black spray paint on a white vehicle. Dude sprayed up the car, walked back to this vehicle in front of the house, sitting in there, talking to some chick. Then he came out and started spraying the Porsche some more. After seeing this go down, had to call the cops, as seeing this happen and talking through them and hearing the dispatcher, and they're like, can you see the license plate? And this car tried to turn around, took 30 attempts like Austin Powers. That's my big reference there when he's stuck in the hallway trying to turn around. Gave all the info. The police officer swung by, had him slip in the backyard because you don't want to be seen talking to cops in the hood. After giving the statement, I didn't hear anything for a while. Kind of forgot about it. Then out of the blue, I got served a subpoena. Someone called and asked where I was. It was a very weird call, almost like a movie. It's like, where are you? I'm like, who the fuck is this? And he's like, well, I got to serve you this in person. So I'm like, what? Like, I'm at work. He's like, where's work? And I'm like, why are you so pushy? But he had to deliver it. So I met him outside work, got the papers to appear in court, had to take off time and everything. My wife took off time to sit in the gallery. She was great support throughout the whole experience, which was very new for me. The day came and what a shit show. The person who was accused was representing herself, which is a very bizarre situation. She looked kind of out of it, but whatever. Go up on the stand, answer your questions from the lawyer, saying everything you've seen, including the spray painting of the dude. Then he went back in the seat. I didn't see who she was, but I knew it was a female. But then she would start babbling off questions, saying, well, what about the people in the back seat? And I said, no. And she's like, well, there were. And the judge is like, well, you can't make statements. These are questions. And this happened up frequently where she just makes statements and they'd be like, strike it from the record. Like in one where she said, how long was I sitting out in my vehicle? And they're like, ma'am, never said it was you. It said it was a woman. And it continued like this. It was crazy. The judge just continuously stepping in to save her from admitting guilt. It was crazy. Very surreal. I had a red shirt and black pants. My wife unintentionally wore red pants, black shirt, prompting the person recording information to be like, oh, did you guys coordinate your date? I'm like, date? What? I don't think we planned this, but I mean, hey, a date's a date. The next day I got a call from the lawyer saying that she got away with it, that no one could 100% say it was her. I felt like 95% sure, 99%, but I couldn't 100%. And you're under oath, right? You can't just guess. So I felt bad because the lawyer did all this work into it, and it seemed kind of unjust, but that's just the way the cookie crumbles in court sometimes, which really made me question it. But I do appreciate the lawyer saying, don't let this outcome determine, doing the right thing going forward. But man, what a whole scene, and the whole courtroom is just like a buzzing hive. People running courtroom to courtroom. I was staying pretty chill playing Pokemon on my phone, but what a unique experience. Hopefully people don't have to go through it, but if you do, just be honest and be you, and that's all you can do, right? But wow, what a scene. But that's it, guys. Episode 69 in the books, still killing it. This episode a little later than planned, but that's life, baby. Summer Saskatchewan, we get busy. My NBA WNBA recap should be coming out soon. Got that NBA one just brewing. It's full of all kinds of goodies now. We'll hype up the new looking NBA rosters, some Olympic basketballs. We're about to experience that. The Paris Olympics start July 26th, so I'm going to start previewing that on this show as well. But hey, thanks for coming in. Episode 69, Q giggling. Thank you. Episode 69 in the books. Still running strong here. Ren City doing his thing. Thanks for coming along. Ren City out.